Hello and welcome to This Podcast Cannot Continue, a podcast about video games by two friends. This is episode 23. We're now into fall. Ben, how are you doing today?
Good. I guess it is fall. Wasn't it fall already last time? It was past
it was
like
fall
September
last time. It feels
20th or
more
whatever.
like fall now, though.
It does, but it also feels hotter this week than it was last week where we are. So,
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. It's kind of weird, right? Like
Actually,
I'm
I heard a guy walking down the street just a second ago when I was grabbing some food, and I overheard his conversation on the phone, and he literally said, "I'm outside, the sun's shining. It's literally warmer than it was in the summer." And I was like, "No, it's not."
No, it's not.
But I like his
a couple
optimism.
of days, like in the last, no. But it's weirdly only going as low as 15 tonight, and it's like been in the low 20s, like 21, 22 kind of thing, apparently, like yesterday, today. I don't know. I want it to go down to like minus something. This is Celsius because we're Canadian. But anyway, I guess speaking of fall, we could say, relative to gaming, which is what this is mostly about, as we're not a meteorology podcast.
We could be, though.
The fall season. I know you said on previous episodes already that you're kind of overloaded with all the things that are coming out.
Oh, it's stacked. I'm waiting on. So it is the week of the release, as we're recording this, of Metroid Dread. By the time you hear this, Metroid Dread will probably be out. My copy's on the way. I'm real stoked. Really excited.
Nice.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be that. And then there's Voice of Cards later in the month.
Oh, is that so soon? I didn't really realize.
Yeah, that's soon. And then there's, and I liked the demo of that. And then there is SMT5, a couple Pokemon games. November's pretty stacked. I don't remember specifically if there's anything in December that I'm like super looking forward to, but there's always sales. Steam Winter Sale. PlayStation has a sale. There'll be sales.
Definitely, yeah.
So there's stuff to look forward to.
Sounds like it feels like it's a year that mostly I didn't really care that much about, and then it has like a really strong ending.
Yeah, I was surprised by that.
Weird, right? But sometimes that's how it goes.
Sometimes
cool, great.
Much to the chagrin of my wallet, but yeah.
And I guess the other thing that's kind of news-ish is like the Sora in Kingdom Hearts, or Sora. Well, he's always been in Kingdom Hearts. Sora in Smash.
That's huge.
From a couple days ago.
I'm actually really happy with that
Sora
reveal.
in his own game.
Yeah, I'm happy with that reveal.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, I got no problems with that. I know people go.
There wasn't really any other characters that I was hearing people saying, and I was like, yeah, that'll actually be good for the game.
Yes.
Like, it sounds weird to say that. This sounds like weird and maybe kind of like toxic or like whatever, but like I don't think that like Master Chief is like a good character for Smash. No. I think he's like obviously a character that has his like status in gaming because his series was so successful, but I don't necessarily think that means that like he would be a fitting choice for Smash. It would feel so awkward and out of place. And like, yeah, I know you can say that a character like, I don't know. You could say like that maybe how far removed is he really in terms of like, cause I think the thing that makes it feel weird is like tech and guns and stuff, where it's like, okay, like Joker has a pistol, like Snake has like grenades and things like that. But it's just kind of like, it just feels weird and wrong. I don't know. I can't explain it very easily.
Yeah.
Like maybe he's really only a couple steps removed from Samus in terms of like the aesthetic of the character and everything, but it just feels like when I try to picture it in my head, it just doesn't feel right. Most of the remaining things that people wanted, things like Crash, like I'm sorry, but I just don't really respect Crash.
Okay, fair enough, but for the aesthetic and the vibe of Smash Brothers, I could see Crash. I could.
Yeah, kind of maybe. Crash still feels like a knockoff to me.
Interesting.
Which is why I feel like no. Like Crash feels like he belongs in like the Smash knockoff game that like someone else makes, like Nickelodeon All-Stars or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's just like a bit of a toxic mindset. Maybe I'm, but whatever. The thing is, it's not me that makes the call. It's not my game. They put Sora in. I think it's a very fitting choice. It looks very right.
Yeah.
Hopefully it feels good to play.
Yeah, he looks kind of floaty, but that could be fun.
I think that's kind of his style, right?
Yep. Obviously, it was probably a pretty big undertaking to actually get him in there. And I've noticed there was a conspicuous lack of actual Disney in it. You know what I mean? Hollow Bastion is a Kingdom Hearts place, and he's got the Mickey Mouse on the the emblem on the Keyblade, but like the Final Smash doesn't have Donald or Goofy in there. There's no.
I think that's like completely fine. Like, okay, so let me just say if there's like a parallel universe, or maybe that's even this universe and we just don't know, but I think it's probably a parallel universe. Let's say there's a parallel universe where Disney's like, yeah, you can put Sora and like go ahead and put all the other characters in and make a map that's based off the Disney worlds that like let's say all that happened. I kind of still think that what we got is better instead. I don't really think that like adding way too many of like the actual Disney properties in the inclusion of Sora and his associated stage and moveset and Final Smash and all that. So I don't really think that would be. I feel like it would take the spotlight off of him too much.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Like, kind of let him be him and represent what is like original about his game and series.
Yep, I agree 100%. I've just been watching some reactions to this, and some people pointed that out.
Are bummed, I guess, or are noticing it at least.
Just because it kind of,
I find it.
It feels like he was like surgically removed from Kingdom Hearts as opposed to like representing Kingdom Hearts. You know, like it's
may be true. Yeah.
It's very careful what was included, but still love it. I think it's great. Excited.
Yeah, very exciting stuff this fall.
Very exciting indeed. Do you want to just jump into it? Hit me with your topic. What do you got?
Yeah, so I don't think there's going to be much to say about this one.
You say that all the time, and then we end up going overtime.
I don't say that every time. But I kind of feel like this time we really won't go like super long, and that might make a sort of a shorter, relievingly shorter episode for once. But anyway, so there's this concept, and I think was exposed to it by Ian from the channel Innuendo Studios. I think I could be mistaking it for another channel.
Okay.
But it's not really, I think, his original idea. No offense to you, Ian, but I think that other people have likewise kind of caught onto this and made various video essays about it. I don't really know how long the topic's been circulating, but I think it's interesting, and we've talked about it before personally. Okay. But I actually have like a bit of an extension of the topic I want to explore. So first, let's just establish what the thing is, right? So there's this like notion that part of the reason that Mario's success in comparison to Sonic as like former mascot rivals is that Mario only ever sold the idea of fun, whereas Sonic was marketed on the idea of like cool as an alternative to fun, and fun is timeless, but cool is sort of timely and something that's ever changing, right?
Okay.
Like what is cool today isn't the same thing that was cool 5 years ago, and things sort of fade in and out of fashion. But selling somebody the idea that your character and therefore the game that they're in is fun is like timeless, and therefore Mario is never really perceived as like uncool, whereas Sonic had to like constantly like change. Or sorry, unfun. Sonic had to like change and
get more edgy.
And just everybody kind of has a different idea of like what Sonic is the right Sonic based on like what was cool when they were like exposed to Sonic or whatever, right? Which is why you can't make a Sonic game that pleases everybody. And there's like various things you can point to as examples of this, like Shadow being like an extension of like the Sonic franchise during a time when like really edgy was cool, as you mentioned, and there's like whatever. There's various other things. I'm not actually here to track the timeline of Sonic. That's not actually the point.
That's not what we're talking about.
No, not really. So a couple of like little things to point out. First is that like fun and cool aren't mutually exclusive. So like I would say, for example, that like the way that like Super Mario Strikers has been marketed is like cool, but it also still promises fun.
Right.
And I'm not necessarily saying that means that like Sonic or any of its games are like unfun, but that like the coolness of Sonic felt like part of what it promised. Like this game's going to be cool, and like Sonic is cool, and like it doesn't really promise that. Like for like Mario doesn't really promise that.
It's cool because it says it is.
Like this
not
is about
marketing. It is cool.
This is about marketing more than it is, and not necessarily strictly marketing, but like I guess like what the aesthetic and the marketing together like work to like present. Like when you look at like, you know what I mean? Like what did the artist think when they like drew Sonic, right? You know what I mean? So like I'll get to the point. Basically, is what I want to say is like this has been firmly established over and over and over again. What I want to ask is where else can this like dichotomy or this sort of like comparison apply between franchises, right? And to bring one to the table that I had thought of when I thought of this topic, and I'm going to be honest with you, I kind of wanted this one to just sort of like go as we spoke about it and rack our brains. So I only thought of one other example, but I would say that the other example that immediately comes to mind is one where Dragon Quest is the Mario in the relationship and Final Fantasy is the Sonic.
That's what I was going to say. As soon as you said this, I was just like, oh, Final Fantasy is definitely the Sonic. Like 100%.
Yeah, and it's like the same idea, right? Because if you think about it, like the aesthetics and style of Final Fantasy has sort of like, it's always consistently had this sort of like
cool
kind of Eastern fashion, cool, like the you know, protagonist's hairstyles is something that people always talk about, or like putting Noctis in his like the kind of clothes that he's wearing and
his design,
you know,
his real world designer clothes.
Yeah, and Lightning having like a fashion thing that they did. You know what I mean? Whereas like Dragon Quest is only ever just going to look like Dragon Quest. I'm not saying that like Toriyama's like visual style isn't cool. Like obviously like,
well, it's very 80s
you know, maybe
anime.
like Dragon Ball is cool when it was cool, but it's not his most flashy version of what he does.
Right. For the most part. Yeah, you're right.
So it kind of feels like Dragon Quest is the one that's selling you that the game is fun.
I would say that Dragon Quest aesthetic for Toriyama stuff kind of falls into like the more like Dragon Ball proper versus Dragon Ball Z as we know it in the West.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just like Z got a little bit intense, which is awesome, but Ball has this sort of like adventure-y fun kind of, you know, every place Goku visits is so much its own place that everybody dresses the same and the buildings all look different and all this kind of stuff. And that's a very Dragon Quest thing that he brought to Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest to me always kind of felt like Dragon Ball, the RPG, just not about Goku. It always has this levity to it, you know? Whereas Final Fantasy sometimes gets real serious.
Yeah, and Final Fantasy takes itself very seriously. And I think that might be like, maybe that's actually the most significant factor of like what the cool really is. It's taking itself very seriously,
because Final Fantasy is self-referential and it does poke fun at itself and its own characters. Like there's definitely moments of like levity in Final Fantasy, and Dragon Quest takes itself seriously as like what it's putting out there as its image. But there are like emotional, I would say like really good emotional payoff moments. For example, in Dragon Quest XI that I loved, and that whole game still felt a lot more light and fun, and even to an extent a little bit self-aware if you want, versus something like Final Fantasy 15, which felt a little less maybe aware that it was a game, or maybe just it was trying so hard to be a thing that sometimes you were really aware that it was trying really hard to be a thing. And I'm going to underline, I loved both of those games a lot. Just, I think there's like there's an elegance to the way Dragon Quest XI pulled it off versus how Final Fantasy 15 sort of has like this. To me, it always comes off as a tone problem in the Final Fantasy games when they're taking themselves extremely seriously, or in any franchise at all. When it's not really sure what it wants to be, but it's really trying to project something to you, the consumer. It always feels like the tone isn't like 100% right, but like Dragon Quest tone is, whether it's happy, sad, funny, emotional, whatever you're doing, you know, epic, there's this vibe to the whole game that is like really consistent. I think it's just because it has such a clear idea of what it wants to be. Which is fun. To me anyways. I know some people maybe think Dragon Quest is a little boring, but it's fun, right?
Yeah. So that's like, I think, the first example that comes to mind. Where else do you think we can like see it sort of happening? It's weird because you like, in order to try to say like where else does this comparison exist, you have to have like two things that are like related in some way, right?
Right.
But like don't but they both do this thing differently. So like I'm kind of racking my brains. And one of the other ones, something is like, what if that exists a little bit between maybe like something like Street Fighter and Tekken?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a little bit of that there as well? I feel like Street Fighter really doesn't take itself seriously.
No, it's a bit silly.
And Tekken has like, just having fantastical elements doesn't mean it's not taking itself seriously. I feel like Tekken's mood is like very serious.
Right.
Right? Like it's kind of like, obviously there's been some humor, but I don't even feel like, for example, like Kazuya's smile at the camera in the Tekken 1 ending is like meant to be funny. You know what I mean? I think it's actually
it is
bad.
funny.
But I don't think that's the intention.
I am really racking my brain now trying to think of this, because I'm trying to think of games that have...
And like, what has it benefited? So this is the thing, right? So like when we talk about like the Mario and Sonic version, it has largely benefited Mario, and it has really, really caused Sonic as a franchise to struggle.
Right.
Right? But is that true of Final Fantasy?
No, because...
I think Final Fantasy has, at least in terms of like measurable forms of success, like how happy is the overall gaming public with it and how much does it sell? I think...
It's huge. It sells a ton.
Yeah, I think it sells a ton. So it hasn't been hurt by it as much. I think it's been critically panned a little bit more. And I think that people really like to make fun of like Nomura's like design style.
Sure.
But I don't think that it's actually really hurt the franchise all that badly.
Well, I feel
like most of the times when Final Fantasy has like suffered, it's been the true suffering has been like other issues, like the FF14 1.0 and stuff like that, right?
Like, I'm not gonna lie, man, most of the problems, like, people could say 8 was probably like a critically low point for the series, but then 9 brought it right back up. I would say that no matter how you slice it, Final Fantasy kind of had like 9 core entries that were all pretty critically acclaimed, and then, you know, when you get into like 10, 11, 12, 13, and then like the compendium of 13 and 10 too, like that kind of stuff is where people started to be like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, so I don't think Sonic had 9 games in a row that were all like top of their form. So even though Final Fantasy is like the cool one, I think it weirdly managed to be cool and timeless enough at the same time that those first... I include like 10 and 12 in this because I think 10 and 12 are great, but some people have varying opinions on those two games, and I understand that. And I think that for a very long time, Final Fantasy was able to kind of walk the line of being the cool one, but also being timeless enough that it still holds up. The only time that I think it really falters is you look at things like 6 and 8, and to an extent 7 in some regards, and you just kind of see that there's a lot of ambition, and they crammed so much stuff into it, but not all of it was like super great. So it ends up being sort of like this, you know, mishmash of like a bunch of parts that collectively make a very memorable and powerful experience, but when examined, you know, out of context on their own, they're not always the strongest design elements. And I think that's something that Final Fantasy does, because it's always trying to, like, you know, the PlayStations are like, oh, we're going to load it with mini games, or 6 was, we're going to make the biggest RPG that's on the Super Nintendo. So they just crammed it full of stuff, and it was great, but some of it is kind of, you know, smacks of padding a little bit. So there's definitely... Yeah, I think it walks a better line than Sonic does, because Sonic maybe tried to redefine itself too much, or kind of got lost, like it got lost in the weeds of what was fun about the original Sonic games. You know, 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles, and even CD to an extent. You know, they didn't handle the move to 3D as well.
No, yeah, definitely not.
And that's part of. You know what? Honestly, part of that could just be like the speed element, and obviously Sonic couldn't have stayed 2D if Mario's going 3D, but
yes.
But just imagine this. Due to like the way the PlayStation could work with sprites and 2D in the same way that you did see some really interesting, like, you know, 2.5D if you want to, platformers in the PlayStation, you know, stuff like Symphony of the Night and whatnot that just looked really clean and had fun visuals and good rotation. All this stuff the 16-bit consoles like weren't super great at doing, like, at high speeds. The PlayStation can get away with it. Imagine if we saw... and I'm not saying necessarily on the PlayStation. I know that, like, you know, Sega was still in the game at the time with the Saturn and stuff like that. Imagine if we saw, like, still sprite-based Sonic, but, like, 3D worlds, and you could go through them, like, really fast. Like, something that had, like, a really striking visual feature like that allowed them to hone the Sonic multiple path 2D run as fast as you can. That could have really worked. The problem is, like, the extreme speed in 3D in Sonic, it becomes really hard to rein that in and also, like, steer him and jump and everything when you just got left and right to go. I think that limitation on Sonic really lets Sonic shine, as we saw with Mania. Sonic Mania is fantastic, right? And it's 2D. It rules.
Could we not argue that, like, almost the whole reason that speed is part of the Sonic formula is, like, 50% because it meant that they could, like, market, like, if the game is literally faster, they can, like, kind of market that the console is faster, aka we're kind of talking about the whole blast processing type of thing.
Right. Yeah.
And B, again, that it presents as cool in that era.
Totally. But I think they could have rode that though into like 2D sprites on 32 and 64-bit consoles.
Oh, totally.
I think they could have kept doing that.
I'm not saying that. I guess all I'm saying is like because they had previously established like Sonic is fast, they couldn't like remove that for the sake of making a better game when it came time to make a 3D game. That I think that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. They had to make a 3D game, and they felt that they had to make it fast, and that creates these really weird moments in the 3D Sonic games. This is, I think, the most jarring thing in like a 3D Sonic game is when you're like going really fast for whatever reason, and then like you have to like hit a wall and do like little like jump. What do you call those? Like spring. Yeah. Those like spring things. Yeah, and the way that he has this like increasing momentums when you're like trying to move around like a little like area where you're not really moving fast, but it's like you took like 3 steps and now you're kind of like running, but the wall's right there. Like it's really weird.
Yeah, it feels weird, and the camera in Mario wasn't even good until we had twin sticks, and the camera in Sonic is even worse, right? Like I love Sonic Adventure 2, and I even love Sonic Adventure 1. Honestly, I really, really do. And those games go on sale on Steam all the time for like $1. So like if you really want to hit a nostalgia, hit those up. But like I'm also not, I'm not so out to lunch that I don't remember how many deaths you get in those games just from like random crap beyond your control, right? Like they're not tight games. Despite their best efforts to be, they're not. They're just not. The collision's weird, the jumping's weird, the controls are weird, the camera's weird. You get used to it, but it never feels good, right? Whereas, a lot of Mario games, you get used to it enough that you can do the triple jump to the belly slide to the long jump to the off the wall, wall jump. Like there's like Mario is just based around movement and feeling good. And Sonic, unfortunately, in 3D is like the antithesis of that. Like it doesn't feel good like at all. You almost have to like enjoy those games despite like their controls, like I do, but it's not super fun to relearn how to deal with that in 3D every single time you go back.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas, so going back to Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, I think both those games had a very linear movement into the 3D space, right? Like it was pretty laid out. Actually, Final Fantasy kind of pioneered the PlayStation 3D RPG, and then Dragon Quest sort of, Dragon Quest 7 was 2D sprites on a 3D rotatable background, but that was like the opposite of what Final Fantasy did. But then as you go on, you have 8 is full on 3D, and 10 for Final Fantasy was full on 3D. So you kind of get like this concurrent evolution of like the same sort of ideas being tossed around. Also, we gotta underline that at one point Enix was acquired by Square. So then the difference between the two.
Yeah, at some point they're not really competing anymore. But I'm more in for the comparison. The competition obviously inspired Sega to make Sonic a certain way. Yes. So it's not irrelevant. But I'm really looking more for the dichotomy than the actual like competitive reasons. Right?
What about like how if we want to extend this out, Sonic's the most obvious choice, but there's also a multitude of mascot platformers.
Yeah, so when I like kind of like cast my mind about mascot platformers, one of the things that jumps out at me is like one of them trying to be like an alternative to everything else is maybe like Conker.
Okay, I was even just thinking even further down the line, like Ratchet and Clank. Ratchet and Clank to me is like toned down Conker, but still kind of like wink wink to the adults, and
That's true.
And also just like violent enough that it's like fun for teens, but also like it's kind of like jumping around and it's like a silly Saturday morning cartoon, so it's kind of fun. But that series also got darker as it went on. Not like a lot, but kind of. And like Jak and Daxter went from like a character action third person jump around to being like super dark, like dystopian Grand Theft Auto in the future. Like you did get this like weird evolution in and around the 2000s in the PlayStation where everybody kind of got edgy a little bit for a while.
That's so
there.
True, right?
Yeah. So like Shadow had a gun all of a sudden, and and Jak wakes up in a post-apocalyptic dystopia, and Ratchet and Clank get more weapons than they had in the original game, because there's like a lightness to the original game that is not there in the other ones, but it's definitely like, it's different. They all had these names like Going Commando and all of these really like dad joke kind of like
exactly
names, and you could tell that like, and to me that feels like a game that's trying to be cool, despite the fact that these were still like, getting good reviews and stuff like that, and the fans really like those games, but to me, that feels like something that's trying to be cool, as opposed to just is cool or fun.
So then the question is, do you think that they changed that because they felt if they always had to try to be cool, that they would always be like chasing something? Or do you think that they changed? Like, I mean, it's because the thing is, like, I haven't finished the game, right? But I've played somewhat into Rift Apart, and it's actually like really tame on that front. It doesn't really feel like it's making very many like double speak kind of innuendos and things like that, right?
Okay. I think that the thing with, so these games growing up and getting more edgy, I think is two things. It's trying to attract new fans that want edgy stuff because they know that those edgier, more adult games are out there, while also trying to appeal to the people who originally liked those games and trying to grow up with them, which with Mario, Nintendo, I don't think literally cares. They're making zero efforts to have Mario grow up with the people who liked it originally, and I think that's part of the timeless charm of Mario.
I also think that's part of what is really working, because one of the funny things is like I've always, this is actually kind of funny, but like I've always thought that this is one of the things that works really well actually in like the Harry Potter books.
Okay.
The way that those were written, and like acknowledgement that J.K. Rowling is a TERF. I'm not making an endorsement here, right? But I just want to discuss that it functions a certain way, right? Sure. And it does, which is that and I think the experience will be basically different from every kid forevermore who reads it versus those of us who were reading them as they came out. Because what was essentially happening was they targeted the same age that the main character was upon the first book's release, more or less, and she released a book a year, and each book covered a year of that series' timeline. And so as a result, you absolutely directly did like write with the age of the reader, like advancing over time. And it like truly does work and advance in how like serious it is and how seriously it takes itself with each successive book, right? But you don't have to do that, actually. And I think that Nintendo with Mario, keeping Mario always roughly like the same kind of like tonally and everything like that, I think the reason why it works when you don't do that sort of like ascending like kind of like growth or evolution of or like trying to follow the audience and like how they change is like what actually happens is that like nostalgia can be the sort of rope that ties your changing audience back to your product, as long as you know that you like sold to them early. Like I think like the only reason I even care about a Mario game now is because I cared about a Mario game when I was a kid. Like, you know what I mean? Like the reason why I think they were able to sell me Super Mario Odyssey is because I loved Mario when I was a kid. So Super Mario Odyssey doesn't feel, if I was a 30-year-old man now who wasn't a gamer all my life and since I was a kid, like it's targeting me.
Well, and this is the thing.
You know what I mean? Like it feels like it's still targeting essentially kids and teens or whatever Mario targets, really, right? But the thing is, because I'm already an established Mario fan, even though I'm outside of maybe like the demographic that it seems like it's made for, it still has me by that sort of like familiarity and like nostalgia tether a little bit.
I think that Nintendo would argue though that it's not necessarily aimed at children. It's meant to be. It's kind of like Lego. It's like, ages 6 to 99 or whatever that Lego famously says on it. Because I think
you're right.
Because I think what Nintendo does here that's great is they know they have something fun, and if it's not for you, it's not for you. And Mario's not trying to pull people who are, who only buy Madden every year, or who only buy Call of Duty, just like they're not trying to convince those people that Mario's good. They know Mario's good, and to market Mario the way they do is very honest to them because they put so much into it and they make sure it's fun when it comes out the gate, right? Whereas, some of these other franchises kind of are trying to chase a moving target in a way. And I think that can lead to marketing, and it's kind of like they're trying to chase a moving target, and that's hard because it sometimes feels like they're trying too hard, and also sometimes you end up accidentally like pandering to or patronizing the audience that you're trying to attract, right? Because they go like,
yes,
and that can be detrimental as well. Not to just keep on going back to the Final Fantasy thing, but one of the things that's interesting with Final Fantasy is that from the get-go, Final Fantasy dealt with rebellions and character deaths and all these heavy topics. So it's not like Final Fantasy got more edgy. I think what happened is it's like design tried to chase cool. The core of the Final Fantasy stories and the mechanics and what makes the worlds tick, I think that like I honestly enjoy the plots from almost all of them, like pretty much across the board. I think that they're great. They do the same things that a lot of other JRPGs do, if not better occasionally. But in terms of like choices made visually, and with like regards to what you actually have to do as the player, some of that stuff kind of feels like the chasing of the moving target. So I don't want to limit this edginess just to like plotline, because I would argue that Final Fantasy, going back to even when it was quote unquote like cool in like the SNES days and all good, like those plot lines are pretty dark. It's not like this darkness and rebellion and all of this came out of nowhere with Final Fantasy. That didn't progress as we got older. That was always there. They just found better ways of telling it, and sometimes succeeded more and sometimes succeeded less, depending on how much how much they put into it regarding the various design choices and whatnot. Not how much, with regards to what design choices they put into it. As we get these games that people call just like fashion games, like 15's classic, the boy band road trip. I think the guts of that story are good, and I think the guts of some of the big cinematic moments of that game are good, and I think that some of the plot points are really, really neat. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in it like real world product tie-ins and stuff that just feels really weird. And
it feels timely, right?
And you know what? Now that you say it, that's probably what the tricky part is with regards to like chasing a moving target, is if you make a game too timely, it's a weird thing to go back to, because people who go back to playing it later go like, oh right, yeah, the Cup of Noodles quest. What was this about? You know what I mean? Like it's weird.
I was kind of thinking about this. I was thinking about this in terms of the way that sort of like Undertale and likewise, oh dear, what's the one I'm trying to pull up? A Short Hike, who the author specifically said that kind of like this like lowercase like style of dialogue was also sort of inspired by tweets.
Right.
I was kind of thinking about the way that itself is sort of timely, because it sort of like reflects an era. Like it's kind of like what you said. It's like, yeah, people do kind of talk that way these days, but also people, sorry, excuse me.
You're talking about the literal text all being lowercase?
I'm losing. Yeah, I kind of lost the idea.
I know what you mean. It represents. You're trying to say that, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're trying to say that it represents like the way people interact on the internet right now with regards to Twitter and stuff like that. So that's going to feel
there
dated.
Might come a day when that feels really dated. Yeah.
I got a reason for why that probably
I guess
won't.
That's where I'm going.
It's because with written language, I think ways of spelling and typing and throwing dialogue together that are not agreed upon or normal can kind of be this evergreen thing, because it doesn't necessarily represent a time, but can represent a mood or a feeling.
It suggests, even a personality too.
Exactly. There's something about it that you can garner that's kind of colloquial. Like there's this one book, I don't remember what it was, but there's this one character, and when they talk, their dialogue has no punctuation and no spaces. And it's in the middle of a book that otherwise is like edited and fine and reads like a normal book, right? So reading their dialogue is hard, but it's on purpose because it's the way they talk, right? And to me, that reminded me of a very video gamey thing, because that's kind of what it came off like, right? It came off like it was like a readable version of how the Animal Crossing characters all have their different voices when the letters appear. It's like, to me, that's what that was in writing. So having dialogue all in lowercase, or how Dragon Quest does it, where they have like the accents like drawn into it, or even Chrono Cross does that. Like some people go like, well, that's not very, like, that's kind of, I don't know about that. But to me, that's That can have a charm to it. It can. I know what you mean with regards to the way the internet talks now.
Sort of represents the same thing?
I don't know.
Is it like chasing like an audience, you know what I mean? Or is it?
I don't know, just because I like it when...
I feel like it makes a lot of sense for a short hike. The game is supposed to have brevity, so does the dialogue. And also there's something really funny about like, haha, they're birds, and like the way the dialogue is like represented, or is inspired by like the way that people type when they're like typing tweets, you know? I just
like tweets. Playing with written language, and I think that it's interesting when people have fun with that form, no matter what it's inspired by. Now, if the game was like you only talked to people through text on your phone and it was all lowercase, that would feel more time-locked to me. But if it's literally just text in dialogue boxes, to me that kind of falls under stylistic choice, and it may be indicative of a period of indie games or a period of time that influenced that kind of writing, but I think going on in the future, it'll just kind of be like a cool stylistic quirk of that game versus something like Shadow the Hedgehog, where it's all fire and he battles demons and he has a gun and stuff like that. That to me is like mid 2000s as heck, right? Like, what else would that be? Yes. That's when everybody was doing that, regardless of how the font looks, you know? So, I know what you're getting at. It's hard to say. I don't know.
Okay, cool.
I'm just racking my brain to think of another.
Yeah. Do you want to try to think of any others? Like, I think that the thing that I mentioned with like maybe Street Fighter and Tekken, I think the problem with that one is like not maybe that much to say about it. I think it's one of the things that people really love about Street Fighter, that it's a little bit ridiculous. I think a lot of people love like a lot of the characters for those reasons. Tekken just feels like it's like everyone's sort of rooted in like a could exist on Earth, but is like a little bit larger than life. But it's not like no one's like stretching their arms like Dhalsim or something like that. You know, nobody's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, you know, the like Devil Jin and his.
I was gonna say
stuff, but it's not. I don't know. It's still presented as cool and not like kind of zany like Street Fighter wants to be.
Right.
I don't know. I think it sort of like fits that dichotomy a little bit, but not in a way that like really gives us anything to talk about. Does that make sense to say?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of fighting games that kind of do various things, but I can't think of any that are like the classic standoff. Like, just if you think back, I think
it's hard to,
Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Sonic, and Mario. I'm really, really racking my brain. Like maybe Mario Kart and Crash Team Racing, but there's really only 2 Crash Team Racing games, and one of them's a remake.
Yeah.
Wait, no, maybe there's 3. Was there one on the PS2? I don't remember. But like Mario Kart obviously is the better game there because they just kept on honing it. Like it just got better and better and better, and now they've just re-released Mario Kart 8 like what, for 7 years in a row or some nonsense. Like it's like that game's been out forever.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why would they improve upon it? It's just so good.
One that kind of came to my mind is like, there's largely 2 major franchises that have done like the mixing a shooter and an RPG together.
Right.
Is like Borderlands and Destiny.
Okay.
But in the case of these 2, I think both of them employ a lot of humor. One of them goes super stylized and one of them doesn't as much. But I don't think that I can easily say that they're playing to like one of them's trying to be like cool where the other one isn't. Like I think that they both think that they're cool and funny, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of interesting because like if you just sort of like look at Destiny's like imagery, it doesn't really play up that it's funny or fun or whatever. But if you watch any of their trailers, at least if not have played the game, there's actually kind of a lot of humor in their writing and in how they present themselves sometimes. So it's hard to say. Like obviously it's not doing what Borderlands is doing, where like literally everything is wacky, and Borderlands is like and tons of guns and blah blah blah, because like they have like more of the RNG in their guns than Destiny does. Destiny kind of likes to have like a narrower range of things so that it can be more like a cycling, like this season or this expansion, like you'll remember these guns, and then like they kind of put some of them in like the vault, as they say, or whatever, where it's like it's not really accessible next season or whatever, and you have like different stuff. Like I don't know, it's kind of weird. I don't really know if there's like a good.
Okay, I got one maybe. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know enough to talk about it, even though I know I don't want to toot my own horn, but I know more about it than you do, I think. But I was going to say like Forza versus Gran Turismo.
Okay.
Or even, know what? Even versus Need for Speed. In this case, I would say Need for Speed.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say Need for Speed was like the fun one. Because I remember playing like Hot Pursuit and all this stuff when I was a kid, but it was never a sim. Whereas Gran Turismo definitely locked into something very special where it was both fun and kind of hardcore at the same time. But Gran Turismo is still the same game. It's still got the same kind of like chill deep house menus with really nice sound design and all the car licenses, and they kind of try to push the graphical boundaries and the sim part of it for a console racer. Like they really go for the realism. Yes. And they do not try to chase a moving target. Whereas hilariously, despite being the fun arcadey one, Need for Speed totally just, I don't know what's like, it never, like, it was like Need for Speed Underground. And then when Underground, like when that wasn't cool anymore, it turned into like Need for Speed Most Wanted and like Carbon. And then it's like the new Hot Pursuit and it's edgier. And it all just kind of became like really weird. So this is a weird case of like,
it's actually kind of interesting. You could say it did the same thing. It went down the edgy rabbit hole
a little bit. But then, so the reason why I want to talk about Forza is because Forza does this thing where they release like the mainline games, which are,
they have a sub. Yeah,
they have Horizon, which is like a free roam kind of like open world racing game with a little bit more like moon physics with the cars. They're not like super realistic, but it's real enough that it feels really good and fake enough that it's still really fun. And I think that Forza really nails that vibe, whereas I think Gran Turismo in its adherence to being super sim kind of scares some people away because it's such like there's no end to Gran Turismo. You can just keep on buying new cars and playing online and tuning them to your heart's content, and that's amazing, but it doesn't really have like it does literally have like a checklist of things you can like complete, but not in the way that like finishing off an open world map does, right? So like Forza really does this thing where it kind of has tried to appeal to both crowds, whereas Gran Turismo once again just like head in the sand for better or worse, continues to do the same thing over and over and over again. And it's always...
It's interesting to me, the way that you mentioned... Well, okay, it's interesting to me the way that you even just right down to like driving physics.
Right.
Is already something that's kind of like its own version of straddling that line, right? Like how arcadey versus how realistic.
Right, yeah. Yeah, because Gran Turismo like gives you options to turn off a bunch of stuff, or turn it on, turn it off. But like you can go in, like even going back to Gran Turismo 3, man, if you buy the right parts for your car, just like in real life, I suppose, you can like tune all of the gear ratios and like the camber angle of your tires and like the spring heights on each individual tire. This is a PlayStation 3 game, and it all affects how you drive, right? Like it's wild, but also can be daunting because some of the high tier stuff requires you to actually really play that game. Like, I don't think you'll get very far playing on automatic in Gran Turismo. It's definitely the kind of game where I would recommend you like really take to heart how to like play like drive manual, because that's how you do the hard races. Like I don't know how you're supposed to do them like if you're just driving automatic, unless you just do what a lot of people did, which was, buy a Dodge Viper or a GTR, put it like 1,000 horsepower into it, and then just like bounce off the walls. Because I used to know people who did that too, right? Like you can kind of get away with that, but like 9 times out of 10, the computer will still beat you on the short game, right? Because it's not all straightaways. Right. So that's another series that I think of a good dichotomy. And I think it was like Need for Speed kind of fell off, and then Forza sort of filled a hole that was like the Gran Turismo, analog, if you will. But then Forza kind of found its own spot, and now they're both just like, do you have an Xbox or do you have a PlayStation? You just buy the one that you have the thing for. Although, if I had both, I would probably buy both because they're both very good games.
So then in essence, basically the way that, different games that sort of occupy the same space, maybe in genre, the way that they differ in how they are made and how they market themselves can have a profound effect on maybe their success, be that sales or critically, and sometimes it can just make them make space for each other.
Yep.
To coexist, right?
Well, so like using the Mario example, you said Mario is kind of like evergreen marketing because they're always just selling Mario, and if you like Mario, you're going to play Mario, and Mario means fun. Gran Turismo is selling a premium card game. Everything about it is glossy. All the ads are shiny. it looks like something that, that you would buy if you were really into the aesthetic of cars and into, motorsport and all that kind of stuff. And that's who it appeals to. And it doesn't try to appeal to anybody else because it has its audience. Same as Mario, right? Whereas I do find Horizon and Forza is kind of trying to do the crossover thing, trying to get a couple more people in because it's got an open world game. It's a little more arcadey. It's a little more fun. You can decorate your cars more. You can add cool parts to it, all that kind of stuff. And then going to Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest is always going to be Dragon Quest. And even though it does do a lot of quality of life things to make it easier for newcomers to come in, it's always the same vibe, right? But Final Fantasy definitely does try to stay relevant insofar as settings and stuff, or maybe not settings because sometimes they go back and forth in time, but kind of like there's like a currentness to when a Final Fantasy game comes out. It's trying to be, the hardware pusher on the console that it's coming out on. It's trying to be the flashy one, the one with the big, CGI movies. It's trying to be all of this. So it always feels like it's trying to get more people in. Come see this blockbuster because you have to, or else you won't know what you're talking about. That's what Final Fantasy does, whereas Dragon Quest is selling to Dragon Quest fans. And if anybody's comes on into it, it's kind of like gates open, come on in. You know what I mean? Like it's all good. But Final Fantasy definitely, I think, markets wide in an attempt to cast a wide net.
I think that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Much to its
Do you think
detriment at times.
that what they're maybe adjusting with Dragon Quest, because we're seeing a big tonal difference in what they've shown so far for 12?
Yes, this is a thing that I'm very, very curious about. Because Dragon Quest has had like plot lines that maybe haven't been done justice by either graphics or gameplay yet, but it has some like sad plot lines. Like 7 has some sad plot lines for the various islands you go to, and so does like 8. I mean, they all do, let's be honest. There's some good little kind of like episodic writing in there that really tugs on the emotional heartstrings. So I don't know that Dragon Quest needs to get edgy. I think it already has like good emotional depth, and it doesn't need to like fake emotional depth by adding edge. I don't think it needs to. So I am curious as to where it's going to go, because in my mind it's already there.
And why then? Yeah.
But
if that's how you feel, then why?
Yeah, but that being said, like, think about this. When you look at gameplay for a game like Breath of the Wild, you get the funny stuff, you get the talking stuff, you get all of this Zelda goodness, this Ghibli children's movie kind of vibe. At the same time, there's a lot of weird kind of creepiness in that game. There's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of like being stalked through the night while you just try to get to the next town at the starting of the game before, you get hunted by a guardian or something like that. There's like legitimate, moments of tension and fear. I know that people break the heck out of that game and render all of the enemies useless. Outside of that, if you're fresh into that game, despite how Nintendo-y it is, there is like a palpable like sadness to that world, an emptiness, and also this like very real sense that you could wander into a situation that you're not able to deal with. And I think that Dragon Quest might be able to approach a sort of quote unquote like edginess or darker storyline if they want to like legitimately become a darker game in that kind of a way, maybe, like add a little bit of that sort of like soft world building that sort of adds to that undertone of darkness without just having a bunch of characters just be edgy. Because that's kind of okay, just because I'm still kind of playing it, obviously. Because I find that's a thing that like Tales games do sometimes. They do have some good like soft world building and fun lore and all this stuff, but then they also just have characters that are like caricatures of evil or something like that, just to really drive home the fact that, bad stuff happens. And I think that's kind of like, that's like giving Shadow the Hedgehog a gun to me.
Is that so like this is one of the things I want to ask then is like, because the look of Arise is considerably different. Is that kind of like happening in Arise, or no, not really?
It's not happening in Arise to a degree that's more than any other game.
Okay.
In the Tales series. This is what I mean. Like, I'm not criticizing the Tales series for this. I still love the Tales series, but every once in a while they just have like a really like a cartoonish bad guy, or thing that happens, and you kind of go, that was a little bit unnecessary. Like, it was just kind of like a little bit over the top in sort of like an anime way, which is maybe why I'm so forgiving of it, because it's kind of the vibe those games have. But it kind of, instead of being like this subtle sort of implied approach, it's kind of like getting hit on the head with a frying pan of metaphor. You know what I mean? And so if we go into Dragon Quest 12, and Dragon Quest 12 is all like, The Witcher 3, and there's like, bodies hanging from trees and ruined towns and fire everywhere and blood and guts, I'm going to be like, oof, this is a big change. It still could be a really good game, but it would be like a huge difference. Whereas I think there's an opportunity for them to make Dragon Quest a little bit more adult without actually getting rid of like the heart of what makes it Dragon Quest.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird to advocate that series stays the same, because I do kind of feel like Dragon Quest XI was kind of like the ultimate version of all of the Dragon Quest games that like preceded it in terms of like look, feel, everything. So I can understand the desire to make a game that's a little bit maybe tonally different, but I'm curious as to what they're going to do, because I don't want the main character to be, some smart-mouthed dude who goes around doing morally gray things because he's just so badass. I mean, I have no doubt they could make it work, but it's
kind of, when I think about like when I think about Dragon Quest, no. But when I think about Tales, like in a way, like Berseria is like a revenge story, and the main character,
I don't mean that those
kind of an edgelord.
I don't mean that those characters are bad. There's that, and then there's the also trope
and
of like,
what should a franchise be? Okay.
I was gonna say it's more like there's the trope of like in those RPGs, like the power creep just keeps on going and going. So when the character starts off like a badass edgelord, it's just like when you get to the end game power creep, it's just like I don't like it's usually just,
then what are you?
It's just sort of like over the top, right? Whereas the idea of like a plucky nobody growing into the hero of legend in the same way that Zelda does, like that feels cool and kind of earned a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know. It's hard. It's kind of like to me it's the actual characterization of Cloud in Final Fantasy VII versus how Cloud is portrayed in literally everything that's not Final Fantasy VII proper. Do you know what I mean? Like in everything that's not Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation 1, Cloud is like a huge edgelord, and just like he's so cool, and he can do backflips and all of this stuff. And if you play Final Fantasy VII, he has like legitimate mental health issues that need to be addressed, and is like dealing with extreme trauma, and is like disassociating from his own identity and the people who are trying to care for him. Like it's a completely different characterization. Like he's not some badass with a huge sword who shows up to kill Sephiroth at the end of the game. That is not what that game is about.
Yeah.
And I think that the characterization of Cloud to the public like completely misses a lot of these like finer details of his character. And I don't know if that's just because they don't think that it sells or because it's not cool, but like there's a very human representation of Cloud in Final Fantasy VII that doesn't really appear in too many other places.
Does it feel a little bit like Cloud, like doesn't Cloud see himself like that a little bit though?
I mean, I don't want to get into huge spoilers for a game from a long time ago, but like kind of. But this is the thing. So Squall was like Cloud, but even more edgy. And there were a lot of reasons in the game's story why Squall is the way he is, but people didn't like him because they called him like a whiny emo kid, which is kind of how he came off, right? But Zidane from 9 is this like, he also goes through like a huge character revelation at one point, but he is confident and happy-go-lucky and plucky. He kind of gives off like a Locke vibe from like Final Fantasy VI. You know how it's like,
I see. Yeah.
He's confident and fun and jokes and stuff, but there's a lot going on under the surface.
Yeah.
He's a great main character, right? And his character has, because he's like that out the gate, I think he's been easier to include in other properties and still maintain who he is. But yeah, Cloud is definitely someone who's kind of suffered as the Final Fantasy VII compilation has gone on. I think, like maybe I'm wrong, and I have absorbed a lot of the Final Fantasy VII compilation. I just feel like it's sometimes confusing. And I'm really happy the remake seems to be doing that better than I expected, to be honest. Man, we did get off topic here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know what though? It's fine because I still think it was an interesting conversation. So,
yeah,
I think it's okay.
I'm not 100% sure
okay.
what point I was trying to make there, but
I'm not really 100% sure what point I was trying to make in the beginning. So I'm kind of happy that it more just like ran its course and ended up being whatever it is instead of.
Well, we were talking about what happens when series basically try to chase this moving target and of whatever with regards to marketing. And so to summarize all the nonsense I was just saying, I think that there's a way forward for Dragon Quest XII to adopt a new tone without becoming alienating to the people who come to it for Dragon Quest. And the part about Cloud was just a really long aside.
Okay.
It was me trying to prove that sometimes Square Enix makes characters way too edgy for no reason when they actually have a lot of human qualities that could be emphasized instead, I think. Wow, that was a lot. Let us know what you think out there in internet land.
Yeah. If you have any more, because I didn't think too hard about it when I was like, well, I got one example, but I just sort of wanted to like see where it would take us. And then I was like, actually, it's not really that easy to find a lot of other examples. So if any of you out there can sort of think of any example of these like dichotomies of like where two franchises maybe have like carried themselves differently, let's say, and how that has affected them and relative to each other, like please let us know.
Hit us up.
I'd love to hear, what we just kind of like weren't sort of able to draw up in our contemplations on the subject. But
and even if you have any contemplations on series that you loved and maybe changed as you got older,
if any of them have changed,
yeah, let us know because evidently we like talking about this. Ben just let me ramble about Cloud for like 10 minutes straight.
I think that's fine.
Shall we move on to the next topic then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, this one might be a bit shorter. I know we just said that with the last topic, but so this is more just a general thing because as we were talking about just prior to this, there were some newsworthy things that have happened this week, but also, you know what? It's happening all the time, and I would like to say with increased frequency, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. I want to talk about leaks. How do you feel about them? When are they okay? When are they not okay? Are they ever okay? I know, for example, that people like them when it gives them teasers into things that may be coming out or things that they would love to see but haven't been announced yet. Or I know you're probably going to talk about it, but the tooltips leaking out for Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker, that caused a big stir amongst fans of that game because they get a better idea as to how their new classes are going to work and how these new ideas are going to work in the like new abilities in the game. That's all cool. Do you think this ever crosses over into spoilers? Do you think this is detrimental to enjoying a title? When a whole game leaks online and people play it early before it's out and then sort of spoil the release date for everyone? Like, I just want to know what do you think about leaks? Now, the reason why I ask you this is because I know that you probably have an opinion on it and know more about it than me. I personally, just to lay down my opinion out the gate, I'm mixed on it. I think that there's like a spectrum of severity for leaks, and I think sometimes leaks of like decades old stuff that gives us developer insight, that seems kind of interesting to me. Things that kind of, toss into the realm of like the Twitch leak, for example, maybe less happy about that kind of thing, just because people's personal information could be compromised.
Yeah, implicated in it. Yeah, absolutely.
So there's evidently, this is not black or white. This is like a very like gray area sort of topic. But what do you think?
I think it comes down to like the type of leak, like the nature of what was leaked.
Sure.
Pretty much in every case, right? So like to talk about it right off the bat with like Twitch, because it's sort of like the source code of Twitch. So like a lot of things could be compromised, right? Like people's passwords, people's account details like that. Maybe even your payment information, maybe, depending. Right. Usually that stuff has to be stored somewhere more like secure that's like kind of a little bit different than like the general like website code or whatever. Like that should be in like a database that the code accesses or something, and hopefully Twitch is able to act in a way that protects that. But there could be issues with that kind of stuff, as well as like now like content creators, like how much they've been paid is like out. Like obviously from their perspective that could be frustrating. Although I'm not necessarily complaining that I know how much content creators make. Just to be honest, it's kind of. Yeah. So I don't know about that one, right? Like, I think one of the other things is with like the source code and stuff being out there on Twitch, like I think that'll probably has probably opened the door to like future abuses already, right? Like for example, like maybe bots will be able to do their thing more effectively, right? Which it usually ends up being like spam bots in Twitch chats and stuff like that. So I could see like future problems coming out of it, or if like the kind of like hackers that pulled that one off have left any sorts of like backdoors that like Twitch might be like trying to plug holes for like months or maybe even years to come. So I don't know. That one's really unfortunate. I obviously I'm gonna say that I would prefer that one have never happened, but some of the information I think is like interesting, and I'm not necessarily against the public having, particularly for me, it's the payouts. On the other hand, when it comes more to like game content rather than like a platform like that, I find that narrative leaks can be really, really unfortunate.
Yes.
Because in a way, it sort of can spoil things for you, right? Like, let's say there's like a service game and there's like a patch coming out and like there's leaks. Like actually this has happened a lot in Genshin Impact specifically, where some of the future patch story beats have become leaked or have become known.
Is this people data mining the game or developers leaking it, or someone close to them?
Yeah, there's like beta people as well. People that get like beta access to like patches and things like that apparently, and it's all supposed to be NDA, but they keep getting leaks because of that. I think I'm not 100% sure where they're coming from in terms of Genshin, but for example, there's there were leaks that like in the most recent patch that came out, like we already knew because of leaks that we were going to see the presence of certain characters that otherwise the story hadn't really told us would be around for that part of the story. And like now there was a leak that like suggests that a certain other character might meet their end soon, and like nothing is actually pointed or hinted towards that itself in the game so far. So like I don't necessarily think it's data mined, but that's actually worth talking about as well, because that can cause a lot of issues too. Like it's hard. Like one of the things that data mining has unfortunately done is like this situation where you have like a game and there's like something that nobody's ever discovered years on is like so much rarer.
Yes.
With data mining being a thing. Now it still happens even to PC games. Like Guild Wars 1 had a sword that was recently found that was found like this year. Or maybe it was last year. I think it was this year.
Right. Despite
Guild Wars 1,
being a thing.
despite the game having been out for like over a decade or something
would you say
right?
Would you say that with not only the internet but also data mining and leaks, that a lot of like, I know you literally just said this, but remember being a kid and people telling you like rumors about Ocarina of Time, like stuff in the game that you could maybe get away with? Do you think that it's just been destroyed? Like our never
data
ending
mining specifically,
like our never ending like love of knowing everything about the IPs that we cherish has turned into this like problem where it's almost like we're insatiable when it comes to finding out information about stuff we like. So we look at the leaks and we look at the data mines and we ruin things for ourselves and get upset at the developers, and there's nothing left. It's like we're eating all of the meat off the bones before dinner's even on the table sometimes. Do you think that that's like a thing that is plaguing like the community these days?
Okay, so like I first thing I just want to say, like data mining itself isn't necessarily the same thing as like leaking.
Okay, but here's the thing. Yes, I know that, but classic example was like Pokemon used to release demos of their upcoming games, and people would data mine them to find out what was going to be in the full game because they made the demos really
not everything is
hilariously bad
or whatever. Yeah.
So like it was just kind of like this situation where then people would be like, well, what's this? Then they'd be like, oh my god, like you leaked to the national decks before the game was even out. Like how did you, you know? And it's just like this. So like I understand that, but there definitely are situations where people data mine demos or whatever and do find out spoiler
or like a good example is like people figure out what the final relic weapons will be in Final Fantasy 14 before like that step's even available or whatever, or like on patch day you like figure out what it is, and it kind of like ruins some of the suspense of like just doing the quest and finishing your weapon. But at the same time, it's nice to know like if you're doing it for glamour purposes only, like are you actually working towards something that's going to look cool at the end? Like, you know what I mean? So it's weird, right? Like I don't know, I think my opinion is that if it's not like a story beat or something that's really going to get spoiled, I'm a lot less against it.
Yep.
Because I think it honestly can just be like helpful as a player to like have that information, even though it can affect how much like sort of wonder you might have for the game. So,
but do you think though that this is like a? Do you think that this is like a we can but we didn't really ask if we should kind of situation? You know what I mean? Like
if you don't, well, no, because if you don't want to, just don't.
No,
I don't look at leaks. I don't know. That sounds kind of.
No, I know that that's true, but you know that people are still gonna. If people are really active, they're gonna see like in talks or whatever. People are gonna see stuff, you know, or like you know, with regard just going back to Pokemon, with regards to how much expectation there is on each new game, when stuff gets leaked or stuff comes out that is really against the fan base, is like you can't avoid that controversy, right? And that gets in the way of people who just want to maybe play it and just see what it has in it, right? Like people who maybe don't have a horse in that race with regards to expectation, they just want to play a new Pokemon game. It's like, do you think that this is a situation where it kind of like, you know, whether you go for it, whether you look for this information or not, it's out there, you can run into it. And is that a net gain? Like, what are we really gaining from this? I understand that when you're taking old things apart to find out how they work, that's kind of like a different sort of way about doing it. But
like for old things, like speedrunners and stuff get a lot out of that.
Yeah, and I have no problem with
people reverse engineering things.
And I got no problem with that. And I'm not making a judgment call on people who leak, or because I'm of the same mind as you. As long as it's not like story information and you're not, you know, plastering it everywhere so people will see it no matter what.
I don't know. Okay, so like I don't know. I don't really know what you mean though, right? Because like if we take like if we use like concrete examples, like if we talk about the tooltips in FF14, like I think the worst thing that could happen is that numbers got changed before those or after those tooltips went public and they weren't supposed to go public. And then so like when, you know, such and such ability was like 1200 potency, and in the final game they've already decided to change it to 900. No one should have seen the 1200 tooltip. Now people see the 1200 and be like, it was supposed to be strong, but it got nerfed before release, or like, you know what I mean? I guess the only
but what do you gain from what do you gain from knowing about I guess my point is like what and I'm not just trying to pick a side.
No, I'm not saying what do you gain from the consumer. I'm saying what do you lose is like you now have people that are upset about something that they could have been like blissfully ignorant about. You know, could have just come out at 900 potency, no one would ever know. You see what I'm saying? Like, when things change between pre-release versions and that were supposed to be under NDA, or like when they get leaks of like development content, and then it's like you compare it to the final versions, that often is something that is more like unsatisfying to people. Like, I don't know. I guess there's prototypes. There's organizations like the Hidden Palace that are into releasing prototypes and just like enjoying the novelty of like seeing what a development version looked like compared to the final one. But they're generally also still dealing with older games where it's like the potential for it to do any like serious harm is gone. But I don't seem to be understanding your question.
Well, it was just more just like, what do you think about leaks? Because I got thinking about it over all of this. And obviously the Twitch thing is, like I said, when it has people's personal information and whatnot, that's not good. Not a fan of that. That's definitely on like the, you know, bad end of the moral scale for me in some well, I mean, there's like obviously just some like random interesting information there, but that kind of information, that personal information, all that's I don't like that kind of stuff. And I get why people do narrative leaks. I don't love it, but I understand it happens in movies, it happens in a lot of things. Like I get it. Not super interested in that. I don't think I have a moral judgment based on that. I just don't like it, you know. And I'm not an authority to make moral judgments anyway, so it doesn't matter. You don't have to listen to me. I'm just someone on the internet. But when it comes to stuff like, like items in the game or, areas you might visit or abilities in an RPG or something, I get that it's interesting to look at ahead of release, and I get that it can like hype people up and maybe get them even more excited for the release.
Or even just help you make a decision.
Totally.
Like in the case of 14, I think that information, most people like want that information as early as possible so they can like make their plans, right?
Right. And I understand that there's cases where that's true, but like, I don't know, maybe this is just the nostalgia in me or something, but I kind of just, sometimes like going into things blind. And like, so for example, I've heard a lot of stuff about how Metroid Dread, just even by its trailers, has been spoiled for some people due to the trailers that even just Nintendo's put out with regards to various aspects. And I think that some people are way more sensitive to spoilers than me. Like, I've seen aspects of the trailers that they're talking about, and I haven't played the game, so I don't know what's going on. So even though I see something...
Yeah, like without context, like what is a spoiler?
Exactly. Well, I mean, and some people would say it's just anything about the game. They want to go in completely blind, and I completely respect that. But for me, I haven't pursued any of this because I do want to go into this and just see what happens. I want to see how the game goes, right? Or like, I've avoided watching some of my favorite, YouTubers and whatnot do like long Let's Plays of, for example, Resident Evil Village, because I kind of want to play that game. And or I have a friend who's definitely going to play it and I want to watch them stream it. So I've avoided that for a very long time, and I just avoid it outright, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, like why do we want to do this? Just in general, not from any judgment perspective. Why? Is it just because we love games and want to know as much as we can? Is it just this, like I said, insatiable desire to just keep on finding out new stuff? Is it to just do it to see if we can do it? Like, I know everybody has their own motivations and people have different motivations for seeking out leaks and whatnot, but what? I'm not talking about why people like literally leak things. I want to be like philosophically, as someone who enjoys content. This is my question to you. Why? Why leaks?
Why not?
Well, that's kind of so as I thought about this today, I was like, that's probably the answer, right? It's just like, if you can, like, yeah, provided it's not hurting anybody or releasing personal information against someone's consent, right? Like the tooltips thing to me feels pretty benign. I'm sure Square Enix didn't want to get out there.
I guess it can also like ruin a reveal. Like, let's say like Sora was leaked.
Right. Okay. But then that's getting into the territory of spoilers. Like, you could, in theory, attempt to avoid that.
Yeah, and you could also say that, like, it's interesting because when we say like spoilers, like usually I feel like we're talking about plot points, but you can spoil a presentation too, right? You can spoil an announcement.
Yep.
You can essentially spoil anything that you're not supposed to know.
Sometimes
by knowing it, I guess.
Sometimes I wonder when you see these like fake leaks.
Yeah.
For like presentations at like E3 or for like fake Nintendo Directs and stuff like that.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Like, what is their motivation? Attention, probably.
But also I wonder if it's,
or maybe sometimes they're guessing, and just if they're right, then they look like they're
I was going to say
leaker or something.
But beyond that, maybe it's like an attempt to like, give form to wishes and desires we all have regarding these things that we don't know anything about, right? Like, be honest, if there was a leak about development on Final Fantasy 16 that gave away a fair amount of what we're in for, would you check it out, or would you
to look at?
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat.
If I knew it wasn't going to have too much about plot,
yes,
then yeah, I probably would. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
It's kind of weird, right? Like, this is like a subject that feels like there should be a lot to talk about, but like I guess I just don't really
tossed us a bad one here.
No. I don't really think you did, but I think that the real question is just like it's just weird because how do I put this? It's weird because it's like I guess here's the thing, like maybe if you're like a developer, it might be like devastating, right?
Could be.
Because like especially if it could have like a profound effect on like what your sales might be, right? Like if something leaks and people are like, well, I don't know if I want to buy that.
Right.
After that, right? Whereas like maybe they weren't really like, But at the same time, like if somebody like finds out something from about your game that they wouldn't want to buy the game because of, and it was like information that they received from a leak, like if something's like that, like critically important, that it's like buy or not buy, and there's no way to have found it out until a leak, like I don't really feel bad for that person for finding out about it, and kind of wonder if it's not a plot point, whether that maybe should have been known. I don't know if I'm like really explaining myself well, because I'm speaking entirely in like an abstraction here, but
right.
Does that make sense? Like, let's say there's like a game mechanic that's like not really announced, right? And it's like something that's like supposed to sort of surprise you, something like that, or like they haven't got to it yet. Okay, let's say like Mario Odyssey was shown and Mario's jumped around New York and stuff, and then somebody leaks Cappy first before Nintendo shows them off, right?
Yep.
And then people are like, oh, that mechanic, like obviously people really love that mechanic, but let's just say you didn't. Okay? Like, let's say you're like, oh, that mechanic doesn't sound appealing to me, or like whatever, right?
Gives you flashbacks to a flood or something.
Something weird like that, yeah. And you're like, well, maybe I won't buy the game. It's like, there's a 50-50 here, right? It's like either like, it's a bummer for the developer because it's now they're like, well, if that didn't leak, maybe we could have sold to that person. But then the other 50-50 that's like more on the consumer side is like, maybe that information should have just been public. So that way people can just like if that decision is going to like make or break people's decision to buy, maybe that shouldn't be something that they don't know about. Now, obviously, this is kind of like a pretty like fake situation because like Nintendo followed up pretty quickly with the trailer that showed off Cappy.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to make like an example that it feels more tangible, right? Like if something like this happened, is it the developer's responsibility to have like marketed their game in a more complete manner, or is it
you want
not
surprises,
their fault?
though.
Like, you know what I mean? Yeah, like it's weird, right? Because like I think that surprises are
good. They're fun.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing because I'm split. I think that these sorts of things, like we've already said, very interesting for old games, very interesting for like past dev secrets and stuff like that. I think it's really interesting for things like the tooltips, as we've said. I don't particularly personally care too much about them. I don't like seek this kind of information out because I like going in a little bit blind, but I don't purposely avoid it. Announcements I kind of like hearing because that's kind of fun. That can like, fuel the hype train, which is occasionally kind of entertaining. I know that some publishers and developers take these things really seriously, and it's just funny for something that I find kind of so benign. Sometimes people get dinged real hard for doing this if they get caught. With NDAs and whatnot, right? Like,
yeah.
Nintendo famously likes making examples of people.
Yeah.
I don't have any specific examples for this, so I'm not saying that they did it in this case, but like it's just there's definitely like a lot of risk to doing some of this, I would imagine, like legal risk, right?
Yes, and also or losing your source too. Like even outside of legal risk, like if you're like a leaker, you have to be kind of careful about the manner in which you leak. So like an example. And actually kind of an interesting example is like, so in the case of Genshin, one of the things, I don't know if you've seen much footage, one of the things that Genshin does is you have a unique number that's like essentially kind of like a second username for your account, right?
Okay.
And you can like add each other by entering somebody's number or whatever. It's not really a secret. It's displayed in the bottom right corner at all times, no matter what. Right. So if you were like a Genshin player with like beta access or something like that, and you're like uploading footage, like
they can track you.
I guess you just blur the bottom right corner, but
sure.
You know what I mean? Like they've made like some attempt to like make it so that you're, well, I don't know. I guess that's not a good example. It's not really hard to crop the bottom edge of the screen or cover it up somehow. I mean, there's been various little things developers have done, like really subtle things to like very subtle watermarks that are like almost invisible kind of thing. Like it's been done a few ways to like make sure leakers are kind of like at risk, but like a lot of the times leakers disseminate their information descriptively instead of with like images and things like that. So it's all very difficult to kind of just say like how much risk there is. It really depends on like the game, what you're trying to leak, stuff like that, what your source is. So like I guess if you're like a journalist and you're reporting on leaks,
yep,
then like to maintain your credibility, you keep like the leaker anonymous and like all these different things perhaps. But if you're just like an independent leaker who like got beta access to something and you're just like publicly talking about it when you shouldn't be, I guess you just have to use a throwaway account. And I don't know. I think it can be done in a pretty risk-free way. Like it's very, very hard for developers to do it unless they like I said, kind of make like some kind of subtle watermark or like some kind of effect on your game, and then you catch the people who are doing footage. Also, I guess if a game's under NDA and you like go live on Twitch, you can like issue takedown requests and stuff, and your accounts can get banned and things like that. But like, I don't know. Realistically, it's pretty hard to plug holes in leaks from like beta leakers and stuff like that. So like, for example, the tooltips from FF14, those were leaked because of Media Tour partners. Almost definitely somebody in the Media Tour went and posted tooltips before the embargo was up, which is, I think it's supposed to be within the next week or two. I think it's supposed to be like a week from now. So we really only got those tooltips like something like a week and a bit early.
But this is what I mean.
Not like dramatically.
When I went back to like philosophically, why is it just like okay,
why did they leak it?
Well, yeah, if it's going to come out in a week, like then that's still way in advance. I guess what I'm trying to why I asked you this question, why I wanted to bring it up is just because it's something that I see happen all the time, and I read about and I hear people talk about on YouTube, and I personally don't have that desire to find out about things before they come out. I like to do consumer research once a game is out to find out if it's for me. That is different. But in this case, it's just like these kinds of like the nitty gritty about upcoming stuff and people who want to know the whole plot line to a game before they play it. I'm always kind of like, I get it, but also like if the game's out in like a week, like what do we like? Why? If anybody knows out there, please explain it to me. I just find it such an interesting phenomenon. And once again, there is literally no judgment going on about people who like to read all the storyline early or who like to, really sift through these leaks to find everything that's going to be interesting to them. If that's what you're into, that's awesome. As somebody who doesn't do that, I'm just really curious. Why? Does that make sense? I don't feel like that's a very good question.
I honestly can't tell you why leakers do it. I think it has to be attention, but it's kind of weird because they're usually doing it in an anonymized fashion. So it's
this is what
it's
I mean,
hard to even say it's that. Like, I actually don't know.
So like with the tooltips thing, if it's going to be out in a week, then what?
Maybe they themselves wanted that information and just assume other people want that information, so they feel like they're being kind of like some kind of Robin Hood.
Fair enough. Yeah, I can understand that. It's just it's an interesting topic, and it's just one that I will admittedly I don't know much about. I don't, and I guess I was just seeing what you thought about it. Yeah.
I willingly subject myself. I willingly look at leaks, but usually not if it's going to be narrative. I don't know. I guess I personally I just can't.
Is it just something we accept as part of the, like, I'm not suggesting we make a change to this necessarily in terms of it, because evidently, like, whether you want to make a change or not, people are always going to. So I guess you just have to take it upon yourself to personally avoid it or not.
I honestly feel more passionate about. Like, we should stop data mining than we should stop leaking. Because, like, usually what gets leaked is stuff that we're going to know eventually, and we're just knowing it sooner, which is, like, not, like, a big deal in that way if it's something like these tooltips or whatever. Like, it's not really going to ruin the game to know the tooltips now versus to know them at launch, right? Like, when you log in on day one of Endwalker, like, when you're level 80, it's not like you don't know what your level 90 skill does till you get it. You could just open actions and traits. They're all there.
Yep.
You can see them in advance, right? So it's like, but then on the other hand, with like data mining, like they can't like hide some secret item in the game that you have to do this like really obscure thing to get, because it's just going to get data mined and people are going to figure it out.
So
people are going to know it's there.
I think that's where my weirdness on this topic comes from. It's because I'm old.
And actually, I think an interesting example, if you don't mind. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's just because I'm old and I like the idea that there's still mystery in the world.
Yeah, I think I agree with that.
That's
what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I will
and
admit
that's what I think data mining ruins mystery more than leaking does, is what I guess I'm trying to say.
Fair enough. I have been unfair and grouped them together. You have changed my mind on that. I agree. If it's inconsequential things, we're going to know eventually. I don't really see that there's any real downside to that. Or if it's like the announcement of a game that's coming up, it
can kill the hype of the reveal, but it's not like the game's not. Like the game will come out either way, whether like assuming it is coming out, like assuming the leak is real.
If I
then
heard
like whether you heard it about it in a leak or heard about it on an announcement, like it doesn't like change the game.
Going back though, like if I heard rumblings that there was a leak that Sega is working on an RPG remake, but they don't have the name of it, I would get hyped as heck for Skies of Arcadia. Would I be less hyped than if that was like, if that was,
and you find out it's a Phantasy Star collection again.
Yeah, quiet you. But but say that just like launched in a Nintendo Direct. If I had no idea and I saw that in a Nintendo Direct, I would lose my mind. If I knew ahead of time that it might be in that Nintendo Direct, I would still probably like my.
But you'd be primed a little more for it and less like genuinely shocked.
Less genuinely shocked, but still super hyped. So like, I think you're right about that kind of leak, definitely.
Okay, so I want to tell you a story.
Wait, before you do that, my knee-jerk reaction is definitely, yes, I just miss the mystery, and I realize that that's maybe not the climate right now. I know that people like learning everything about everything, and that I'm just a old man yelling at kids to get off of my lawn. That's what I've learned from this conversation. I've done a lot of self-discovery today.
During the world first race for the Epic of Alexander in Final Fantasy XIV, data miners discovered the existence of the True Heart. So during the
you've told me about this, yes,
Alexander Prime phase, Shinoa, the little kitten, coral kitten, appears on the edge of the arena, and she blows like a heart outward into the arena, and simultaneously 4 of the 8 players. Specifically the 4 that don't have like orbs tethered to them. Those 4 players will have like a circle that they drop,
right?
That puts like a little field down under their feet for a short time, and then eventually explodes as like proximity damage. If the heart that Shinoa like sends outward, it passes through like all 4 of those like circles, it turns yellow. It becomes targetable where it wasn't before.
Okay.
And it's called True Heart and can be attacked. And then you can attack it. And what it does is the original one would have just went straight across the arena and meant nothing. But the True Heart will change directions and move towards the part of the arena where Alexander Prime is going to appear and cast a sacrament or do essentially a plus-shaped AoE that you have to dodge. So before they figured out the True Heart part of the mechanic, they were basically guessing and hoping to get lucky enough to dodge where Alexander would appear, because you don't know without activating it in that way. And then furthermore, once you get to the Perfect Alexander phase, in Perfect Alexander, he shows you how you die, kind of, and then you do the mechanic differently so you don't die. In Perfect, you can't see that first step where you would see how you die because you haven't awakened the True Heart. Because what happens is you get a buff called Enigma Codex. So what happened is data miners found 2 things. They found the model of the yellow heart, the True Heart, and they found the Enigma Codex buff. Now, the Enigma Codex buff actually wasn't that big of a deal, because it's already present on Brute Justice and Cruise Chaser, if I'm not mistaken, as early as the prior phase and whenever they're like targetable. So players might have assumed like world progress, and I think Sphia specifically said that they did believe, at least for a while, that buff in the data mining wasn't anything special, and that like, it's right there on Brute and Cruise Chaser. Like, there's no reason necessarily to assume that you as a player can get that buff. Just because it existed, like AKA the data mined buff is the one that appears in the bosses. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like just like as a data mined buff, you don't necessarily know that means that it can appear on you. That there's a way to get it for yourself. And of course the existence of the yellow heart, just knowing it exists doesn't necessarily mean you know how to make it yellow. Although it did kind of reveal that they needed to try things during that mechanic where you might just assume that it's nothing, or like you might you might not look there right away.
Okay, so data miners basically figured this out ahead of time.
Data miners gave breadcrumbs that led to understanding the mechanic better, but they didn't necessarily reveal how to do it or whatever. Realistically, the biggest thing it did was it just flagged that something needed to be done there. And by the way, when the heart turns yellow, I think that's the moment you actually get the Enigma Codex buff. And it's because you have that buff, you can see the future. So you can see how you died and then you can act differently.
Is this a good story for pro data mining or?
No, it's anti-data mining because like it's sort of not the greatest example because it didn't like really ruin the discovery or understanding of the mechanic necessarily. And at the end of the day, what they did when they figured out how to do it was mostly organic rating, progression rating, blind progression rating, which is trying things and figuring it out and whatever, right? It's just they had a bit of a clue that they needed to look at.
Right.
It's called inception formation. So they knew that they had to look at inception formation. So you're saying that mechanic specifically?
It took kind of some of the mystery out of figuring out the mechanics organically as a team, even though they still did that.
Yeah, because it told them where to look, whereas instead they might not have known where to look at all.
I see.
Yeah, because like I think the bigger one is knowing that the yellow heart existed. If you didn't know the yellow version of the heart existed, like where else do you look in the fight for a solution to the fact that you get to Alexander Prime and you just die and you don't know how you were supposed to know? Right? You'd probably keep still looking at Prime, or you might once you decide maybe you have to go back to an earlier phase. You might look at any of the 3 earlier phases. I said Prime. I meant perfect. Whatever. Basically, it sort of cut down the amount of the fight that they had to look at significantly because they could figure out like if that yellow heart is part of the Epic of Alexander and is related to inception formation, then in order to solve this, we just need to do inception formation differently enough till we find the right solution, right? Like it narrowed things down. And so I guess
it makes it harder for the developers then to make things that are legitimately difficult for people to figure out.
Yeah, exactly. Because if it's meant to be figured out in game only, then it's like, it's compromised a little bit, right? When things like this can happen. So like when you're trying to make like a secret mechanic or like basically secrets in general or like a puzzle or something like that, and like you can find things about the solution by data mining, it's just really unfortunate. I don't really know how else to say it. It's just unfortunate because it can like kind of affect you as a developer, what you're even able to do. Because people are going to find it. Now, I think there's actually a nice solution to data mining, which is, besides just like better basic data security, like encryption and things like that, which is actually to spend a little bit of effort. And like, obviously this can cost you literal money because you'd have to like, for example, create assets or whatever, but to put some kind of red herrings in, right? Like imagine if just for fun, they had put in like, they put in like a yellow heart. Imagine they had put in like a bunch of other things, right? And like none of them are actually used by the game.
Right.
Then it's like you could have this whole like you're kind of like obscuring things a little bit by making it like hard to know, like you could easily have people like looking at the wrong thing and like thinking like that could also just lead to like people wasting their time and being upset with you, but you shouldn't have been data mining anyway.
Right. It's kind of like old school piracy protection, like in Earthbound, where if it's pirated, the game just gets harder and harder and harder until it crashes.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah. Yep.
I don't hate that solution. I think that you've convinced me. There's definitely inconsequential versions of leaks, and there's definitely things that are more harmful to the organic discovery of a game's secrets. But
yeah, I'm with you on the mystery, to preserve the mystery.
Yeah, where do you feel out there, internet land? Do you like the mystery? Are we completely off base with anything we said about leaks? Let us know. Do you like leaks? Do you search out leaks? Are you a leaker? If so, don't tell us your name. I mean, we won't tell anybody, but I would assume you're, being anonymous is important.
If you're a leaker and you would want to make a throwaway and anonymously talk about why you do it, we would love to know.
That would be because obviously I have no idea why I feel the way I do about this. This was mainly just me trying to figure out myself through Ben, the lens of Ben. Shall we move on to backlog? I think we've exhausted this for now. Let's do it.
Okay, cool.
We are moving to Backlog Land, and I'll see you there.
You know what it is, it's the backlog.
All right, we're back in Backlog Land, and you're up first. So what do you got this week?
I guess Yeah, I didn't really think ahead on this one, did I?
Well, I don't. Yeah. Well, it's fine.
Well, you know what though? I was definitely thinking about finishing up some like 3DS kind of things. It's interesting because like ever since the Switch came out, it's like really easy to sort of forget that the 3DS like exists
And has an amazing library. Let's not forget that.
and has an amazing library. And so there's like a lot of games on the 3DS that I never like really went back and like wrapped up, even though I'm intending to finish them someday. And so maybe I'll just talk about one of those.
Yeah. What do you got?
In
lying
that
around?
case, I guess in that case is one that I've been thinking about for like a really, really, really long time, which would be like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga.
Oh, the remake, right?
Yeah, it's got like this
Yeah.
Bowser Minions addition to it. I don't necessarily know what it entails, but yeah, it's like a light remake. Yeah, I don't know. I've enjoyed several of the Mario RPG games.
Yeah.
Be that literally Mario RPG on the SNES itself, or like I really like Thousand Year Door in particular, out of Paper Mario.
Mm-hmm.
Mario and Luigi's just kind of like something I sort of left on the shelf, so to speak. But you know, maybe I should spend some time like playing a little bit of that every night before bed or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the Game Boy Advance original, and I've tried to play it a bunch of times, and honestly, I like it. I just never finished it. I'm not trying to steal your thunder here, but no, I agree with this pick. I think I would play the Game Boy Advance one though, just because I already own it. That's literally the only reason.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yep, and enjoy some Yoko Shimomura OST goodness.
Oh heck yeah. Oh heck
Cool.
yeah.
I don't have much to say about it. Just it's there. I want to play it. Feel like I've been neglecting the 3DS, but nothing about a new system coming out means that the old one is like bad or not worth still playing. So like, yep, just want to maybe spend some time with the 3DS again, and that's definitely a game that I want to wrap up. Well, not wrap up, but just like get into.
Yeah. No, you got me thinking now about 3DS games. Yeah. But that is not my pick. My pick is a game that I've been thinking about just because I love the second in the series so much, and it meant so much to me as a teenager, or a teenager? Maybe. I guess literally. Can you guess what it is? It's the second in a series. It came out when we were teenagers. I played it on the GameCube.
So you have played it before?
I've played the second in the series. I want to play the most recent installment, and I've been thinking about it for a while just because I think it would be fun. Not to like get super into.
I don't know. Metroid Prime 2?
No, but that is a good one. I do need
3,
to finish
I guess
that.
if that's the one you want to play. I can't even tell if you're saying you want to play the second one or the third one. I don't
I
really know
have
what
played the second one. I
oh,
want
okay.
to play.
Today I'm not. Yeah, I know, but just because you have played it doesn't mean it's not still on your backlog.
This is a good point. I was
Like
confused.
I don't know what the actual pick is. Yeah, I'm losing you a little bit here. What is it?
Soul Calibur 6.
Oh,
I've just never played it. And I really Yeah, I really liked 2, and I know that it's sort of like a soft reboot.
Are you
Kind of.
sure that I didn't put it on when you were over one time? Because it came out pre-pandemic, and I have it.
No, I don't think we ever played it. You might have shown it to me, but I haven't played it.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I know that people kind of liked it because
it went over.
You might have
Like,
shown me
if you're a Soul
2B.
Calibur fan, it went over well enough. Yeah, I think I might have shown you that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not necessarily why I want to play it, although obviously, yeah, kind of. But it's just I really liked 2 a lot, and I didn't really see anything in the interim between 2 and 6 that looked good, and then I heard that this one was pretty good, and I was like, well, maybe I'll check it out. And I haven't played many fighting games lately, and I've kind of been like thinking about it, and it's kind of old now, so you can probably find it on sale. So maybe I'll wait till like around Christmas and see where Soul Calibur 6 is sitting. But
Yeah, because it does have a lot of DLC, so you really want a sale
yeah,
to like
grab it all.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's just like I've been thinking about playing more Soul Calibur 2, and I was kind of just like, oh, I should check out like the latest one, because There's like
Also, while the PS3 store is still alive, the Soul Calibur 2 HD is only on the PS3.
Is that the only system it's on?
I believe so.
And Xbox 360.
And is it?
Yeah.
I think it was also a download only.
That could be cool to get. Yeah. Do you think once the store closes down, they'll like port that forward to anything, or do you think that that's just gonna like stay there?
I think it's worth
Yeah.
being a little bit concerned about it. Like it's like anything, right? If they think it'll be profitable, maybe they'll port it forward. But
man, everybody loves Soul Calibur 2. That was like the game. They released 3
seems like if they were
versions of
going
it.
to, yeah, like if they weren't going to like remake it, like if they were literally just going to port it forward, you kind of think they'd already do it, or would have put it on PC or something with more longevity. The
Right.
fact that it's like only on those 2 platforms is a little bit like kind of makes it feel like it's not. I don't know, like I don't know.
There were a bunch of weird HD remakes of games that kind of were locked to digital only PS3, Xbox 360 games.
Yeah.
There was a handful of those things that I hope someone out there is preserving, but that doesn't change that my pick for this week is Soul Calibur 6. So if you out there in Interland Land have played either of these 2 games, let us know what you think about them and how high up on our backlog you think they should be. Because, yeah, honestly, if this was on sale, I mean, I could make time for a fighting game. I could make time for a fighting game just to like, kind of goof around in for a little bit. That'd be a good time. Then when the pandemic's over, we could have a fight.
Yeah, absolutely. There's netcode, so if you get it on like,
Ooh.
I mean,
Is it cross-platform?
I don't know.
Oh, well, something to examine for later.
Yeah, we could look into it.
It's that part of the show.
I think that's a worthy pick, though.
Oh, yeah. It was a surprise for me. Definitely. Insofar as I didn't know that I wanted to play it until I got thinking about games that I haven't played that I wanted to play, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, Soul Calibur 6. That's definitely on there. But with that, as I tried to say a second ago, it's that part of the show again. Ben, do you want to hit him with the socials?
Yeah. You can find us on Twitter, TPCC_podcast. On YouTube, This Podcast Cannot Continue. On Twitch, This Podcast Cannot Continue as all one word. Reminder to change your like Twitch passwords and stuff like that as a result of the recent breach. On all of your favorite like audio streaming things, such as like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Audible, and most other platforms, as This Podcast Cannot Continue. And that's really it, isn't it?
That's it. Thanks for listening. As always, this has been episode 23. We're looking forward to episode 24. Let us know what you think. Comment, subscribe, reach out to us any way you can and or want to. For now, this podcast cannot continue.